Well, congratulations everyone. I hope you've had a good celebration today, because today is World Wide Web Day. It's a global celebration dedicated to web browsing, the online activity that brings the whole world to your fingertips and places a wealth of knowledge at your feet. I sort of mixed metaphors there. It's at your fingertips and your feet, but you get the idea. World Wide Web Day is interesting because the World Wide Web is something specific. It's not just any sort of internet. It's this specific internet that brought computers together across the world. And you may be thinking to yourself, Beryl, where would I be without the internet?
Yes, I'm very glad of it.
Yes. Well, we're celebrating it today.
My horizons, no end.
On this auspicious occasion, World Wide Web Day, what would you say are the main things being changed in your life because of the World Wide Web?
Well, for one thing, I'm able to see what's happened in the skies from a plane flying point of view. I have an app.
Oh, right, yes. So that's an interest of yours, so therefore this has transformed it. Was it an interest of yours before? Oh, right, so it's
No, I didn't realise that airports had code names.
Oh, okay, yes, yeah.
You can identify by the code name what...
Is the code name the little three-letter thing that you have on your ticket?
Yes.
Oh, okay, all right, that's the code name for the airport.
And I've got an app on all my devices called Plane Finder.
Okay.
Which tells me when a plane has taken off from a particular airport and what time it will get to its destination. It's expanded my knowledge of places in the world.
Yeah, well, I suppose with planes, you get that because they cover, it basically covers the entire world, doesn't it? Is there anything else, a big thing, that because there's the World Wide Web...
Also, it provides me with a daily jigsaw.
Oh, there you go. The thing for me with the World Wide Web has really been the differences of opinion. The censorship still, there was still a gatekeeper, but you're able to spot them more easily, at least for the moment, because you have a lot of noise. If you just search the internet, there's quite a lot of noise. There's good stuff and bad stuff, and it's all jumbled up together. There's misinformation and true information. Now, when you have a gatekeeper like Google, for example, tries to screen out certain opinions and tries to foist other opinions on you, you would have a little disclaimer put underneath the search thing saying, check here for the real facts, basically.
Yeah. Doesn't it depend on how often that site is looked up on a day?
It would be nice if that were how it was still done. Yes, that would be lovely. Mm-hmm. And I believe there are search engines that do that, but Google manipulates it. It has a rather complex algorithm for why it places certain search results at the top. And so you'll get a different result with Google. I mean, they all do this. Mm-hmm. Or the ones that are making money out of it. So at the top, you normally get paid ones, but it does say sponsored underneath so that you know they've been paid, that they come top on the search. And I used it years ago when I was in China. I used it to advertise the language school.
Right.
That you could pay to come up top on the Google search. But they have a more subtle thing. For example, news. They favour certain news sites. So you come up with a certain ranking in the algorithm. It goes in your favour to be chosen if you're regarded as an authoritative news source. For example, CNN is seen as an authoritative news source when a lot of what it produces is so biased. Maybe not as bad as the BBC in this country, but pretty bad, right? I don't really want them. I want someone unbiased. Really unbiased.
Is there anyone who is unbiased?
I wouldn't say there's anyone completely unbiased. But what you can do to ameliorate that is admit your bias. Okay. So CNN is very left-wing and liberal in its opinions. Mm-hmm. And effectively supports the Democrat Party as it currently is. But it doesn't admit that. It says that it's simply taking the facts and telling them to you, which quite patently isn't the truth. Oh, I would like an independent creator to have the same weight as someone like CNN. I, as the searcher, will decide. I'll have a look. And like you say, one of the best things, why not just have it the most popular site, most viewed site? Because most likely, CNN will be up there. But some of the independent creators are more popular than CNN. So you'd have
them. Being popular doesn't mean you're right.
No, but you suggested that as a way that it did it, the way that it should select. Now, choosing it because more people have clicked it is one way to do it, but the way that you shouldn't do it is choose it because their bias happens to be the same as yours.
Right. I was thinking, though, yesterday I was using the internet a lot, and particularly some plane mapping sites.
Yeah.
But I was surprised to find that there were some sites that would appear automatically in the list for me to select, but not others.
Yes,
Now,
that's exactly what I'm talking about.
All it is a flight.
It's a rather complex algorithm, and I think it does include whether they've been paid.
Right,
Yeah.
okay.
But when it comes to things that are more politically charged, then Google and Facebook, another place where you might search for something, and certainly Twitter, have their own very left-wing bias. And it's so obvious to some of us that that's what they have, and you can point to examples of it. But they claim that it isn't. Now, we're celebrating World Wide Web Day, and the reason I brought up the censorship or throttling, I guess, is not actually censored, necessarily. It's just you can't find it in a search.
Yes, or they're not at the top of the list.
Yeah, not at the top of the list, exactly. On YouTube down as well, the same thing happens.
If I want to find out whether something is actually true or not, quite often I'll go and search on Reuters.
Reuters, yeah. They're not too bad, Reuters. I think that they're pretty good. There were a few of those which are just basically news feeds. So
yes.
But in selection of news, of course, the actual selection of the news is a sort of comment in itself, isn't it? And so if it's a sort of comment, it could be censorship. Like we are talking about something specific, we've chosen a topic, which means we're not talking about other topics.
True.
So it's a natural part of selecting the news. But the point I was making about the World Wide Web, which we're celebrating, is that we're then able, even despite these gatekeepers like Google, who are trying to get their own point of view across at the expense of the freedom of the internet, you're still able to access it. So you can see what's happening if you choose to look. And so the World Wide Web, I think, really has opened up my eyes, anyway. We're saying, well, what's the best thing this time? I've actually changed my mind about quite a few different things because I was able to research them on the internet, which would have been too difficult when you had to look up articles on a microfiche in the library.
Yes, I do know about microfiche. I got a microfiche reader at home.
Well, I'm thankful that we don't have to use them anymore. That's why. What do you think, Norman, about World Wide Web Day?
I was casting my mind back about 20 years before the internet was easily accessible at home, and Beryl had a newspaper a day, sometimes 2 or 3 newspapers, and these were stored because there was always something in them that needed to be going back to, and we had cupboards full of old newspapers, and we were almost becoming choked by newspapers. Whereas now, we do not have a newspaper that comes to the house.
No,
so the trees are breathing a sigh of relief.
Yes, you can store a lot more information.
And Beryl has far wider access to information.
It's also the problem, though, isn't it? In that there's so much information, you can get swamped with it. But it's the same with translation of something. If you translate something, you could easily lose the original meaning. And the more you try and make it understandable in the new language as you translate it, the more likely it is that you lose what was in the original language.
I think that's true.
You lose the nuance. And it's the same thing with looking at all the data from the internet. So the good thing about the internet is there's all this information, but it's too much. So we're grateful to companies like Google, which simplify it for us. But then we don't necessarily, with Google, see the signal of data. So if there were now a growth of rabid left-wing politics, which was very worrying, if you looked at all the data and saw that the real danger was left-wing politics, then you'd probably be right. That's where the real growth in radicalism is, in terms of political thought. But the opposite is true if you just, for example, take your news from the BBC or search on online BBC, because they've curated it. So they screened out this signal of data where you see, it's all the left wing. It's all the left wing. And then you look back and say, actually, the Nazis were left wing as well. It all sort of clicks into place.
Yes. Use an illustration.
Yes. Go ahead.
There was one from last week. We had a very hot week. There were fires going off here, there and everywhere. And there was a street along the River Thames that caught fire. Very sad it was for the occupants, I'm sure. Now, the news kept saying that it was in the area of Dagenham. Now, I looked up this place and I thought, whereabouts is this? I've never heard of this village that they're talking about. It was a rural village. It wasn't really anywhere near Dagenham.
Yes.
It was a place called Wennington, and if you were to look up on the map, you would find that it's a greenfield village. But what annoyed me about it was that everybody was being led to think that it was in the depths of London, industrial, houses all close together, no green grass, no trees, no nothing. And that's what really annoyed me about it. When I found out that it was a village all on its own, surrounded by fields, I thought, that annoys me.
Yeah, there's a good example. It's wider than that, because every time you try and screen out noise, you make a selection.
Yes.
So this is where the wild days of the internet, or if you escape from Google and use other search engines, which don't have the same sort of algorithm deciding what you see, what's put in front of you, you get more noise. If you're searching for a certain pair of shoes or a flight to Bangalore or whatever it might be, yeah, Google's great. But if it was something more nuanced, more difficult to find, if you were trying to do a survey that's wide-ranging, Google wouldn't help. Particularly if you were looking for that signal that I talked about. What is it? We've got all this. It's all messy. But if you have selection, you'll find what the selectors are expecting to find, the people who are selecting. That generally you will. But if you have all the noise, you've got a chance of seeing what's really there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really what I'm saying. And the World Wide Web gives us more a chance of doing that because we've got more data. So, yes, well done, World Wide Web. It's great to have you. Now, I'm just going to ask you a question here, a bit of a one-question quiz for you, Beryl. The World Wide Web was actually started some time ago. We're in 2022 now. But the World Wide Web was started some time earlier when the great Berners-Lee uploaded the first ever image to the World Wide Web. What year do you think that happened? The first ever image uploaded to the World Wide Web.
I'll go for 1986.
In fact, it's 1992. Yeah, I know email and some form of the internet was around before that. But the World Wide Web, first image uploaded was in 1992. It was a photo of Les Horribles Sonnets, which was a parody pop band founded by the employees of CERN.
The one based in Geneva.
They were the first ones to have a sort of internet, of course, because they needed to operate over distance. So Les Horribles Sonnets was a parody pop band founded by the employees of CERN. So he uploaded a picture of them. Now, that was the first ever picture uploaded. So a picture, not text. The first ever picture was then. Have you ever heard the term surfing the net?
Oh, yeah.
It used to be the term they used. Now we say browsing, don't we?
Yes.
A bit like a shop or a library. But this term was created by a librarian called Jean Armour Polly. She coined this term, and it was part of an article that she published called Surfing the Internet in 92. So she made up this term whole cloth, surfing the Internet that everyone used.
Right.
Now, when was it announced, would you say, that the World Wide Web, this is my final question, would be free to everyone?
I think that would be later, 1995?
Very close, 93 was just a year after Berners-Lee had uploaded that. Now, he could have had a copyright on it, a patent maybe, and he would have been phenomenally rich.
Yeah.
Not like, we think of the owners of Google and CEOs of Amazon and all that sort of thing. But no, he would have been so wealthy. I mean, he still did pretty well out of it, but he chose not to because it was for the people.
Thank you, Tim Berners-Lee.
Yes, thank you for the World Wide Web.
It wasn't just that he was careless and he missed a trick. He actually deliberately designed it so that there could be no ownership.
Yeah.
Because he felt that anybody who owned it would in some way eventually try to control it. That is still something that is under debate. It's almost one of the freedoms of this world that is hanging out there and keeping going. Little
details that are interesting. The first popular search engine was Yahoo search, and it used to have that sort of music. I don't know if you remember that. But that wasn't the first one. The first FTP archive indexing site, a search engine, file transfer protocol indexing site, was called Archie.
Right.
We don't have that. It's not around today, I don't think. But no, you said we're talking about the 80s. In fact, the World Wide Web was actually started in the 80s. In 1989, Tim Berners-Lee, who we've just been calling by his surname so far, he was at the CERN Centre we just mentioned in Switzerland, and he invented it as a way to communicate with co-workers via hyperlinks, which is now a well-known phrase. So www has become the main means of transaction and communication among humans, and you often say that is the subdomain of your website. These days you don't necessarily need to do that, but that's how it started.
I find as a broadcaster that people who are presenting and talking about the internet do stumble over the www. They aren't words which flow together. I tend to, in a more easy way, call it triple W, because that seems to be a softer, easier thing to say. A friend of mine always refers to it as the wibbly-wobbly world. And a lot of broadcasters, and even the BBC people, seem to stumble over having to actually say www.
You don't need to say it. Actually, I think that the most difficult thing is to remember to say the dot. Again, it doesn't follow. So, for example, for this show, you could go to... What I do it now, www.berylandpete.com. But people, not always, but so often they would say www.berylpete, and the .com they get, but it's just too much at the start. In fact, you don't need to do that. Just write berylandpete.com, it goes to the same place.
And then, of course, you have to spell out the and, because if you make it an ampersand, then it comes out funny, or you get AMP sometimes gets inserted. So that's another trip up.
Right, so World Wide Web Day, we've had some information discussion about it, but it's a celebration. Generally, we've found good things to say about it, although many people see the seedier side. I think it was in our last episode we talked a little bit about the dark web. Being able to be connected with all sorts of people means that bad things can be passed around as well, and bad people can organise to do horrific things.
Yes.
Social media grew up as part of the internet alongside the World Wide Web, and that has been a force for good and evil as well, I suppose.
That's right. Yes.
So it's changed things, I think, mainly for the better.
Yeah.
How can you measure these things? But that's just my perception.